Bet the Board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Welcome in to the Bet the Board podcast, NFL Week 13. Oh, hopefully it is our lucky number around these parts. I'm your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host. We did give Brad the Thursday off despite a strong performance last week talking NFL in our holiday show. Payne, how goes it, my friend?
It goes. You're not a fan of the countdown. Threw a little wrinkle there for you. Threw you off a little bit.
I mean, there was a brief hesitation. It was a pause. I felt like I was in a workout class. Hold. Okay, go. Type stuff that you had going on there. So it may or may not have been why I lost my train of thought getting this thing off the ground with an introduction.
Here we are. Week 13.
Survive in advance, at least theoretically.
Survive in advanced. I think we got all our venting done on Monday. Monday's show actually had a lot more information than a usual Monday.
Well, you tipped your hand on where some of these market movers were going to go, and hopefully our listeners took advantage. They'll get a little CLV. No guarantee it's a win or a loss one way or another, but plenty of options as they get towards Sunday with your favorite phrase of this season and last year, asymmetric risk.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do this thing. Let's fire this up.
You want to talk a little Thursday night football?
I mean, listen, I think it's because of how bad some of these teams are. We haven't quite had the matchups that are as interesting as they have been in years prior. So we're trying our best here to provide a little intrigue for you. But boy, not the best.
There will be no full-scale breakdown of Falcons-Jets, much to the chagrin of listeners. We will not delve into the Chargers and Patriots either, but there are a couple of games that have caught our eye that we'll share our perspective on. And Thursday Night Football will start things off.
I'm going to cut you off. Someone can't quit the Patriots. I made it a point on Monday that I'm quitting the Patriots. Someone was like, no, we're not quitting the Patriots. Down to 4.5 from 6.
The big question in this game is it really a buy on the Patriots or is it selling the Chargers at this point is what I can't quite figure out.
Which... probably a little of both. And typically, over the last handful of years, you're typically buying the Chargers on the road. That's when you get the most value out of them.
The craziest part is the one book that is showing 4.5, not a book necessarily known for taking the sharp.
No. Well, if you've been on social media, you might think otherwise.
That's a very good point.
Before we get in trouble, let's go back to Thursday.
They also take some of the largest limits, apparently, if you go on social media. My app will tell you a very different storyline. Yeah. All right. Thursday Night Football, the Dallas Cowboys.
The hot dog.
The Dallas Cowboys and the Seattle Seahawks. A full week of rest despite playing on Thursday. Dallas playing the week after Thanksgiving like they've done for multiple years. This number has moved one way since opening. We saw as low as a 6 at a prominent offshore. We're now out to 9, even 9.5. Total in this game up from 45.5 through the key of 47 out to 47.5. And Payne, the Cowboys are the first team in NFL history to win each of their first 5 home games by 20-plus points each. They've won 13 straight home games dating back to last season, their second longest streak in franchise history. A big golf clap for a team that didn't have much home field advantage for a number of years in the mix. But when you look at the Cowboys' 8-3 record, I mean, this is a team that has taken advantage of teams below 500, still looking for a win against the team with a winning record. We'll see if it comes tonight. But they've won games in dominant fashion, and that's kind of what you want to see. Since that Week 9 loss against Philadelphia, 3 straight wins by 3 touchdowns plus, becoming the third team since 1950 with 7 20-plus point wins in the first 11 games of a season. Meanwhile, the Seahawks come limping into Big D, having lost back-to-back games since a 6-3 start. The playoff prospects for them starting to get dimmer by the day with the upcoming schedule. And when you look at the Cowboys, they've been ATS darlings, going 30-14 against the number since the start of the 2021 season. So, Payne, when you look at this, we can say all we want positively about Dak Prescott and this Cowboys offense, how prolific it's been since they tweaked some things, some may say, during the bye week to come out with a lot more aggressive offensive game plan, throwing vertically down the field against the Seahawks defense that couldn't wait to get out of the month of November, knowing how quickly they're taking on water? Or is it the much maligned Seahawks offense looking for an identity with Geno Smith against Deron Bland and his quest for 37 pick sixes in the 2023 season?
You're awfully chuckly today.
This is what sleep deprivation will do to a guy, all right? Let's put
4
it down.
a.m. airport run out of you.
That's what love does for people, Payne.
So you mentioned the Cowboys coming out of the bye. Certainly pressing all the buttons correctly right now.
It's almost like they had divine intervention.
They had an intervention, all right. It's been a complete 180. Drastic adjustments made, obviously, by Schottenheimer and McCarthy. And you're looking at Dallas right now, second highest pass rate over expectation since that week 8 by first down. Highest pass rate over expectation. It's to the moon. And you also look at Dak's depth of target. It was a lot of dink and dunk. That's increased over this 5-game stretch. And not a surprise. Cowboys offense number 1 EPA per play by a long mile since their bye week. You look over that same stretch, the Seahawks secondary. I don't know what's going on there because there's a lot of talented names. 24th in dropback EPA allowed. The quarterbacks have also been a mixed bag in that sample too, right? Obviously, people will be like, oh, well, they faced Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson. Certainly, that's the high end. The other end of the
Howell torched him.
PJ Walker, right? And Sam Howell, that's kind of the low end. The weird part is it's been busts and explosives. If you look at some of the down-to-down stuff, it hasn't been as poor for Seattle. So, I mean, Clint Hurtt's got to get it figured out in terms of allowing the coverage busts. Leonard Williams, doubtful for the Seahawks tonight, so big loss in the middle of Seattle's defense if he, doesn't end up going. I think what's interesting to me is we were keying, if you remember, on a lot of under running back props earlier this season against that Seattle defense. First 5 weeks, the Seahawks were 3rd in EPA per rush allowed, number 1 in rushing success rate allowed. Since week 6, Seattle's 26th in EPA per rush. They're allowing a success rate 14% higher over that same stretch compared to the first 5 weeks. So even the run defense is starting to dwindle a little bit. On the other side, quickly, Pete Carroll, if you've read some of his quotes this week, he claims it's night and day difference in terms of Geno Smith's health. Obviously, that's a positive. Hopefully, that's the case. We know the Seahawks have been, revolving door at right tackle. Haynes is going to miss tonight at guard, so you're a little weak in that area. And when you look at Seattle, when they've stepped up in class, they really haven't been able to protect their quarterback. So against Baltimore, the Ravens got to Geno on more than 47% of dropbacks. Last week against the 49ers, they pressured Geno on more than 47% of dropbacks. Now you get the Cowboys, number 1 pass rush win rate. And so, that matchup's a little nerve-wracking. The other thing that we've talked about a couple times, because we seem to be breaking down Seahawks games at an irregular rate relative to their viability in terms of wins and intrigue, but here we are again. We've mentioned a couple times Geno Smith, the types of coverages he's been good against, the types of coverages he's really, really been lackluster against. And Dan Quinn, Dallas used the highest rate of man coverage. Geno Smith has been horrible against man coverage, bottom 5 in EPA per dropback. It's the largest delta in terms of quarterbacks, man versus zone coverage among qualifying quarterbacks in multiple key passing metrics. So, I mean, these are the reasons we've seen Dallas go from an open of 7 to 9.5 since open on Sunday. It's certainly going to be all public money on the Cowboys today, regardless of price. Books have kind of gone to that teaser protection line. I am starting to hear a couple indicators suggest that we could see a little influential money if this got to 10. A couple guys value bet 10 minus 15. I wonder, and you would know better because you've been in these positions more often, do you just see a book flicker to 10 so they can take back some money? Or I don't know. It's kind of a weird vibe right now in terms of current price.
If I'm a book catering to a recreational customer base, I'm going to wait as long as possible. But as I see some of the other more influential books go to 9.5, I dangle a 10 out there, and just to try and see how quickly they gobble it up. If it hung out there for a little while, I'd feel comfortable leaving it there. If as soon as I went to 10, I took a bet from a player that I respected, I'd come right back off of it and continue to flicker, take a little bit more liability, and know that 9.5 to 10 is kind of that sweet spot where this game needs to be. You mentioned that Seahawks offensive line, Payne. Abe Lucas expected to come back. I mean, what do we think he's going to be dealing with that chronic knee injury? I mean, it can't be worse than what we've seen with the revolving door that
you're projecting Abe Lucas to be back this week. Is that what they're saying?
That Pete Carroll keeps saying that right tackle Abe Lucas is going to be back. I mean, we've seen these smoke and mirrors before.
Maybe I missed that. No, that'd be a huge get back then, because you've basically been going with like Forsyth and Old Man Peters in that rotation, and neither of them, I mean, last week, dreadful. If you look at some of their game grades, bottom of the barrel among tackles last week with that revolving door at right tackle. So that would be massive. I actually didn't see that. So if that is the case, it'd be a huge upgrade. It's one of those games where the vibe is like...
We do have to keep in mind, though, it's Pete Carroll saying he's going to be back, so that may mean he's back.
Gino was going to be 100% healthy last week, too, if you talk to Pete. Meanwhile, he's doing his availability.
Medical degree. He may have an honorary doctorate, but Pete ain't no doctor.
Okay. So let's monitor that. I'll get a little more clarification here shortly, but that was a good catch there. And it'd be a huge upgrade. But it felt like, based upon what's transpired with Dallas offensively over the last month, the improvements they've made, based upon the public cleaning up last week, what everyone's eyes saw in like prime time on Thanksgiving as everyone's watching the Cowboys just pummeling the Commanders, in Seattle getting bludgeoned on Sunday night or on Thursday Night Football there is the last game of the day. There's a lot of guys that said, hey, I'm just going to get out. I'm just going to lay the 7. I know where this is going. A lot of sharp teaser action on the Cowboys. I feel like, again, if you see 10, there's going to be some value bets the other way. It doesn't feel like anyone I've talked to has like a massive stance, like a strong stance on a game that you would think has moved 2 points or 2.5 points. It's like, hey, we're either going to get out ahead of what's obviously going to move. We'll throw the Cowboys in some early teasers, and then on the way back, it's like, you know, maybe we value bet Seattle here at 10. That's kind of been the vibe for me.
You know, one thing I will say on the final note, at least for me on this game, you do wonder about Dallas's level of focus in this particular spot. You get the big win against a division rival on Thanksgiving. Now, I know the Commanders are down, but you have a massive game coming up in prime time next week against the Philadelphia Eagles. You wonder if it's a survive and advance type mentality instead of going out there to make a statement against a Seahawks team who could be desperate to try and bounce back and put together a little bit more complete performance. And while I don't believe much of what Pete Carroll says, harder for Geno Smith to be worse off this week than what we saw last week against the 49ers, where it was a pick 6 accounting for essentially the only touchdown that the Seahawks were able to put on the board there. So should be an interesting game, and to your point, we'll see where this market goes. Wasn't sure if there was anything else you wanted to add before we pivot into some of the Sunday times.
No, let's go to Sunday, especially this next one. A little more intriguing than on the surface once you start digging into it. So let's get to it.
And you mentioned it. This game has been a little bit of a battle in the betting market as well. Denver Broncos and Houston Texans, a game I'm sure everyone had circled on their calendar before the season started or after the first few weeks, in a battle of 6 and 5 teams where a win here would go a long way towards one of these teams being able to secure a path in the AFC playoff picture. We saw the Texans open 3-44 at some books, got as high as 4. There was a little bit of buyback, but the total has seen one-way movement. We're now out to 47.5 kind of across the board. And when you look at these two teams, I mean, kudos to both of them, along with the Indianapolis Colts, 3 teams in the league that have already exceeded their preseason win totals coming into the year. And I think a lot of people, myself included, wanted to write the Broncos off for dead when they started the year, 1-5 or whatever they were. When we look at the Houston Texans, look, I mean, this is a team that hasn't been favored often. The last 7 times they have laid points, 0-7 against the spread as a franchise. That includes C.J. Stroud, yet to cover a game as a favorite in his brief 11-game NFL NFL career. And Russell Wilson, in the wake of their performance over the weekend against the Cleveland Browns, talked about resilience and everything this team has shown. And a lot of that has been because of this Denver Broncos defense that, after getting embarrassed by the Miami Dolphins early on, has gotten healthier and have shown signs of returning to a unit that is more than capable of being disruptive, slowing down the pass, even if they're vulnerable against the run. Meanwhile, the Texans' Payne vertical passing game, Tank Dell and Nico Collins, all benefiting immensely from C.J. Stroud and what he's been able to do in an improbable rookie campaign. But this is still a Texans defense that leaves a lot to be desired. I'm just not sure the Denver Broncos have the kind of playmakers that can exploit them the same way Trevor Lawrence and company did last year.
Yeah, so I mentioned from like a viewing perspective, I'm most intrigued by this one of all the 1 p.m. games, because I think we're going to have a little bit of a battle on both the side and the total here. You mentioned the side opening 3. It's now hooked. Total reopened 45.5, 46, okay. Right? And we've shot through the 47. I think there's probably going to be some bites on the other side of both keys. I think that's a real possibility. To me, battles like this happen because of variance. Right, you dig into team variance metrics, and both Denver and Houston are wide ranging. Right, Denver, one of the 5 teams with the most variance this season. Houston in the upper third rate of variance, and now you throw them on the same field together, and this is why you're going to have some differing opinions aside from just this season in general being a little nutty compared to previous seasons. And so, like, I start to look at both teams' current form, and I always try to put myself in the position of a better thinking on both sides, right? If you're trying to fade the Broncos, something I think, makes some sense. It's because you believe Denver's 5-game winning streak is a bit phony, right? It's mostly aided by turnovers, and you look, Denver's plus 13 in turnover differential during this win streak. 38% of Denver's points scored have been set up by turnovers over this 5-game stretch. And sure, like, if you remove turnovers from the equation, the Broncos defense still looks like a bottom 8 unit. The key, though, is adjusting for schedule. And I think that's why we could eventually see some money on Denver, not just because of the new price above the key, right? But the trending schedule discrepancy between Denver and Houston is quite large. Since week 5, the Broncos have played the hardest schedule of opposing defenses in the NFL by a long mile. Not a single below average defense by our metrics. 4 games against top 5 defenses, 6 games against top 10 units. And Sean Payton seems to have found the formula he likes best. And the players have bought in, because winning cures nearly everything, right? You think about going into that first Chiefs game, Todd, on I believe it was Thursday Night Football, right? There was shit going on in the locker room. Players were going to be traded. Now all of a sudden you're winning, and the vibe's a little bit better. But you think about what Denver's doing offensively, they're attempting to go a little bit lower variance at its core with running and short passes or deep bombs, mostly in single coverage. And I'm talking to one of my guys last night. He actually likened Denver's offense right now to a modern-day NBA team where everything is either a layup or a three-pointer, right? It's either a short pass or it's a deep bomb or we're handing it off. And
it's a smart comparison, and a lot of what we saw from the Saints in the final years of Drew Brees' career as well.
And you look at the Texans' defense, 24th and 25th, respectively, in EPA allowed on short and deep passes. This is the first defense Sean Payton will scheme against that's been below average since week 4. And you look at the Texans defensively. Since week 5, they have faced quarterbacks like Desmond Ridder and Bryce Young and Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr, Kyler in his first road start in about a year. And then you look at the other side of the ball. And, excuse me, C.J. Stroud obviously has exceeded expectations. People are talking about him for MVP. I think that's probably a little...
Pump the brakes.
Yeah, pump the brakes a little bit. He's been fantastic, really efficient, right? Throwing from outside the pocket and on the move. Unfortunate blow last week, Titus Howard going down, out for the year. Tunzel I expect to play, but he's dinged up. Tank Dell will play, he's dinged up. Stroud last week was under pressure on 61% of his dropbacks against a Jaguar team that struggles to get pressure. So I was a little surprised by that. We'll see if Denver's pass defense is truly improved or if it's all interception aided. But this is the toughest pass defense on paper C.J. Stroud's faced since week 7. You look over this like C.J. Stroud could be MVP chatter. It's the Cardinals secondary. It's the Bucs secondary. It's the Bengals secondary. The Panthers, the Jaguars. Those are the pass defenses. All 19th or worse. All with key cogs missing from their secondaries due to injury, right? Tyson Campbell was out for the Jaguars again last week. I have a weird feeling when Bobby Slowick throws on the film of Denver's defense. He's got all these run game roots going through his DNA from Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel, and he sees his quarterback getting pummeled last week, pressure on 61% of dropbacks. One of his key cogs is out for the season along the line. One of his key cogs battling injury. Like, it wouldn't shock me if there's a little bit more run-heavy approach when you start to look at Denver's defense against the run, and I think that's where the variance lies in this total, right? We all think to ourselves, hey, Houston's talked about coming out. We're going to throw the ball deep down the field. We're going to let C.J. Stroud control all of the offense. And yes, that's probably the case, but don't let Bobby Slowick see a couple 4 or 5 yard runs start to look good early in this game, because the way Denver's offense is playing, they're more than happy being methodical. And so if you just on paper are saying to yourself, like, CJ Stroud's pushing it, Denver's defense is overrated, they've just been living on turnovers, like, you can see why this total got hit over. As you kind of start to decompress and dig a little bit, and now that we're approaching 48, I think we might see a potentially different viewpoint. Not saying which one's correct, but I think we start to see potentially, some, again, going back to the side and total, I think you're going to end up being battles.
When you look at the market improvement we've seen from Denver defensively since the early season struggles, do you attribute it to them taking time to adapt to Vance Joseph's scheme, or is it just strictly correlated to health and the fact that they're getting more of their players back out there? We knew Patrick Surtain is a lockdown corner that takes away part of the field. We've seen Nick Bonito really being able to generate pressure, and it's just getting a lot of their horses back in the mix that have allowed them to play at such a substantially better level overall. Turnovers aside, down to down, actually looking like a competent, capable defense, a far cry from a unit that surrendered 70 against Miami.
So everything, right? Down to down, it does look better, right? They're still 25th, 26th. If you adjust for schedule, middle of the pack. So yes, they have gone down to down when you adjust for schedule from we're talking historically bad to average. The turnovers have certainly helped. The health has certainly helped. You obviously saw what the organization did with its defensive ends. They ditched the old guys, started throwing in the young, hungry guys, and then the turnovers have happened. So it's a little bit of everything in terms of why Denver's defense is improving.
Hey, that's what it takes sometimes, and being able to keep everybody from abandoning ship is a credit to Sean Payton. To your point, winning cures all, and the Denver Broncos an excellent chance to move to 7-5, along with the Houston Texans. A fascinating matchup for two teams who I'm sure, if you would have talked to their respective head coaches, did not anticipate playing a game of this magnitude in the first weekend of December. Two teams, however, that did Payne were no doubt the 49ers and the Eagles, and they'll renew acquaintances at Lincoln Financial Field, scene of last year's NFC Championship game, with the 49ers now a 3-point favorite, soft 3 we'll call it. Total on the game 47.5, pretty much painted throughout the market. And I found this interesting when Kyle Shanahan was asked on the point spread. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I don't really know how that stuff works. Shanahan said Wednesday via 49ers transcript, so I don't really know why it is random. No, Kyle, it is not random. It is a credit to what your team has been able to accomplish when they have their full wealth of weapons out there and available. Both teams have a top 10 rushing offense and a top 3 rushing defense this season. When we look at the Eagles, 5-0 this season when trailing at halftime, including each of their past 4 wins. The rest of the NFL in those spots, just 35-129, a win percentage north of 21%. They're the 4th team in NFL history to win 4 straight games, all when trailing at halftime. First team in NFL history to win the first 4 games of a season when trailing by 10-plus points. Score differential-wise, the Philadelphia Eagles, plus 64. San Francisco 49ers, plus 140. And the Eagles, plus 64, is the second worst point differential by a team 10-1 or better through 11 games in NFL history, rivaling the 1976 then Oakland lost. It would have been the Oakland Raiders back then. Yep, have to double check on that. And when you look at Philadelphia, if this number closes where it is, would be the first 10-1 or better team to be a home underdog with their normal starting quarterback under center in the regular season, going all the way back to 1970. Payne, when we look at San Francisco offensively, should be a path for them being able to throw the football against an Eagles defense that hasn't quite lived up to their high standards set last year, as both Darius Slay and James Bradbury haven't quite performed up to the names on the back of their jersey.
So when it was obvious this was a game that was going to make the show, I was like, boy, I'm really looking forward to deep diving this thing. And then you spend about 10 hours assessing the game since it opened on Sunday, and you realize, for as great as this game is, the talking points are a little bit more obvious than the last game we just broke down between Denver and Houston. The market movement has been telling. All of the things that, we've discussed in some form or fashion over the last month is still present. And we've broken every Eagles game down on this show since week 9, right? They've either been in great games or primetime games. And the reason we've seen the movement is, for the multitude of reasons and that we've discussed. And Todd, obviously, feel free to step in at any point, whether you want to expound or have a question. But I think when I kind of just throw this against the wall, there's a couple of things that seem pretty apparent here. The first is the 49ers 3-game losing streak isn't believed to be real now. Right, it was a combination of injuries to a different degree to Trent Williams, Debo, and CMC. And we've talked about at the very onset of this season how the 49ers injuries are more impactful to them than other teams' injuries because of player uniqueness and the lack of depth that the 49ers have. They built this roster where it's a lot of high-end premium talent, not a ton of depth. The second thing was turnovers, which are somewhat random, and they tend to come in bunches. And that leads to variance. And the 49ers had 7 turnovers during that 3-game losing streak. But once you actually remove turnovers from those 3 games and just look down to down, the 49ers were still churning out a 57% success rate. Brock Purdy was still 8th in adjusted EPA per play despite being down his left tackle, his 1B receiver, and CMC again was battling through some injuries. So once health improved and the turnover variance subsided, we expected the 49ers offense to skyrocket and hum again, and here we are. I would expect Kyle Shanahan to be in his bag here. The primo script in game plan. And you don't always get that week to week because these guys are very protective of some of the good stuff that they reserve for big games. It's very obvious how important this game is to the 49ers just based on how they've talked about it for the last 10 to 11 months. And some of the things Kyle Shanahan does formationally, key on the areas the Eagles organization doesn't value position-wise. And that's linebacker. It's safety to a lesser extent. I know they went out and got Byard, so relax, Eagle fan there. There's a reason Shaq Leonard...
Sounds like a lot of Reed Blankenship slander, if you ask me.
I actually don't mind him.
No, he's been great for them and stabilized a position where they had a lot of question marks. When you get a player that deep in the draft, or I should say undrafted.
Yeah. There's a reason, though, right? Like Shaq Leonard flew into town to visit with the Eagles yesterday. So the middle of the field is going to be an area Kyle keys on with CMC and Debo and Kittle. Nakobe Dean is out. Zach Cunningham is beat up. The Eagles are bottom 3 in the NFL in EPA allowed to tight ends. Ayuk on the outside will likely see more volume just based on the Eagles getting shredded by outside receivers. I mean, Gabe Davis, you could have put on a milk carton. He went absolutely ham in that role last week. The Eagles are dead last in the NFL in EPA allowed to outside receivers. Eagles also play a ton of man coverage, and that's when Ayuk has been Purdy's go-to guy. The Shanahan scheme certainly derives from running, and the Eagles are downtrending in that area, something you pointed out to me. And so I went back and looked at it. Below average in EPA per rush allowed since week 8. And then you look at the injury report, the big fellas inside. I'm not saying they won't play, but Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, and Milton Williams are all battling something injury-wise this week.
All lower body, too.
You wonder. I thought one of them was a concussion, but regardless, right? They're all battling something, right? Yep. And you wonder when, the style and type of game catches up to the Eagles. They're 10-1, right? Amazing they've made it out of this tough stretch of games, winning them all. I feel like we're almost giving them a pass because we know how good they are. They made the Super Bowl last year. They're 10-1 this year, and so it's like they're Philly guys, right? This is gritty. They're just figuring it out. But that's never been what betting's about. among the like very sharpest of the sharp, right? Finding truth and victory and defeat is important to finding future value. And again, like Dallas outgained the Eagles by 1 yard per play. Early in the third quarter against the Chiefs, Philly was being outgained 222-70. Early in the third quarter against the Bills, Philly was outgained 315-90. Like, candidly, for large stretches, the Eagles are just being walloped. And so you have the matchup, which favors the 49ers offense. The market initially failing to kind of understand the 49ers 3-game losing streak was a touch phony. And the Eagles' last 3 wins, a touch phony. But add to that, right? The Eagles' last 2 games, Monday night, high leverage game with high leverage plays having a claw back from being down double digits to the Chiefs. Short week game against the Bills. That turns into a 5-quarter game with overtime. The Bills ran 92 offensive snaps, which means the Eagles had to defend 92 snaps. This will be the Eagles' 3rd game in 13 days. Meanwhile, the 49ers are coming off a mini bye, having played last Thursday. And if you look at all the data in terms of like rest and you kind of focus on the latter stage of the season, it means a little bit more. Some of these mini buys and buys means much more later in the season.
It's all the kind of things that you're looking for to try and build into the number. And while we joked a little bit about what Washington-Oregon point spread would look like in the Pac-12 championship a few years ago, I think a lot of similar things could have been said about this, where you would have had a chance to bet the 49ers right around a pick 'em or -1 instead of seeing this open 2.5.
Well, no, you could do that.
Go to 3.
I mean, Sunday night, you could have laid 1 at Chris on the 49ers. By the time we broke this game down Monday, you could still you still could have laid 2. Even yesterday, when you think about the mechanics of Kyle Shanahan and how good the script is and how fast the 49ers start and how lethargic the Eagles have started the last couple of weeks, you could have laid -125 on the 49ers first half money line. It's now -150. So I mean, even when the market was 3 full and you're hearing everyone say like, well, how high can this go? It seemed like the first half was a little bit neglected and there was another round on the 49ers first half. Offensively for the Eagles, do we want to touch it? Like, it's not, I don't have a ton of stuff there, but you want to graze over that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it hurts. And when we try and figure out the potential absence of Lane Johnson, I know he was a limited participant. We'll see if he can go. But that threw a wrench into things that Philadelphia wanted to do along the offensive line. Jordan Mailata has been, good in, one of those positions as well. But you look at San Francisco defensively, and this group looks to be significantly different with the addition of Chase Young in terms of providing a bookend pass rusher. Nick Bosa's productivity has gone up substantially, and the group hasn't allowed a passing touchdown since Chase Young donned 49ers colors. Now, for the Niners, it's not all a positive story on the defensive side. Eric Armstead missed practice with a foot injury, and we know he dealt with plantar fasciitis for extended stretches last year that can be quite painful. So we'll want to monitor his status. But when you look at San Francisco, I mean, this group was embarrassed last year against Philadelphia. Could not stop the run, and it wasn't one player. It was truly a backfield by committee. Have you seen enough out of San Francisco defensively that'll allow them to make Jalen Hurts beat them purely with his arm, more so than some of the running capabilities that tormented them in the NFC title game?
Yeah, I mean, this one's interesting. And again, don't have like a ton on this, but as I think about this, right, like offensively for the Eagles, they've struggled to get the run game going. And we all thought like getting the offensive line a little bit healthier would help the run game. The Eagles right now trending towards bottom 10 in the league in running back runs. It's been Jalen Hurts that's kind of carrying that torch there for run game efficiency. He is trending a little bit healthier. The positive, and maybe we're off here, it does sound like Lane Johnson will play. If you remember, this groin injury required surgery last year. He played through it. They got the MRI. They claimed they wanted to be cautious last week. They claimed the slick grass was a reason that they held him out. Now, let's keep an eye on the weather in this one. Right now, it looks somewhat clear. There's been some discussion of potentially some light rain. And like, let's just say if Lane Johnson's got a 70% chance to go, I think rain maybe decreases that a little bit. But my vibe is he's probably going to be out there. You said it perfectly, though. Let's keep an eye on Eric Armstead dealing with the foot injury. But you have to be able to run on the 49ers. Their secondary has been vulnerable at times this season. But the one thing I will say has been material change defensively for the 49ers if you're not paying close enough attention. Shanahan, we mentioned a couple weeks ago, right? He started like changing his schedule after the Minnesota game where he was going to be in the defensive meetings. And he basically stripped Steve Wilks of all his blitzing superpowers. And the 49ers are now 30th in blitz rate. And that's allowed more guys to be in coverage because I do think, you have to worry about the Eagles' throw game. And if you are playing in a state from behind, like I mean, the Eagles aren't getting shut out here. I don't think. I think they'll find some relative success. But where I'm going with this is like Wilks is down on the field now. They're not blitzing as much, which allows more guys to be in coverage. The players in defense has responded better to that. The secondary has also moved pieces around, right? Ambry Thomas is now inserted into the starting lineup. He's opposite Charvarius Ward on the outside. They've moved Lanier from outside. Now he's kicked into the slot. So there's been some reasons for the 49ers defense improving a ton. And then when you can run Bosa, Chase, Hayward, and hopefully Armstead out there as your front four, you really don't need to send that fifth guy. And Bosa isn't getting doubled as much. Chase isn't getting doubled as much as when he played with the Commanders. So, I mean, you can see why real money came in on the 49ers. Again, like Sunday night, this line was 49ers -1, at Chris. And what's interesting here is like there's been some chatter. If this gets to 3, how can we not be on Philadelphia, right? That's kind of some of the behind the scenes chatter from the guys that
we're about to find out.
That was the behind the scenes chatter from like guys who didn't initially buy the 49ers. And yes, to your point, we're starting to see some of the indicators go from like soft 3 to 3 flat. And I think that's the question. Like, has the price gotten too out of hand? Like, what respected bettor group will finally go? When will they go? And for how much, right? Is a real position or just a value bet? And usually I know these things in advance. And I've heard some chatter, but it's been nothing concrete.
Yeah, you do wonder the cumulative effect of this Eagles gauntlet of a schedule, knowing that they have a massive game on deck. I'm not saying they'd get caught overlooking the 49ers because a win here would put them in the catbird seat to secure the number 1 seed in the NFC. But clearly the division still very much hangs in the balance. If Philadelphia were to stub its toe and then potentially lose back-to-back games this week and next against Dallas, things get a lot more interesting in the NFC East.
Is this the equivalent to Rocky getting a little fat and happy and then just initially getting taken out?
I mean, I think there's a little bit of that because you look, if you
Clubber Lang was hungry, man, and the 49ers are hungry.
You continue to live on the razor's edge. I mean, eventually you can't erase double-digit deficits against good football teams every single week. It just takes so much out of you, and I think you highlighting the rest component of it that works against Philadelphia playing 3 games in such a narrow window against the team coming off a mini bye, is worth something in terms of the number and contributes to why this price did not last below the key of 3, and we're seeing some of the sharpest shops already trend that way. You can follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. Follow the podcast, as always, for all things Bet the Board at Bet the Board Pod. And Payne, the final game, at least that we'll break down on today's show, is the Sunday Night Football affair at Lambeau Field, where it's the Kansas City Chiefs installed as road favorites, but they did open at 7, number down to 6 across the board, and we saw one of the sharper shops move off that secondary key of 6 to 5.5 just moments ago. And when we look at Patrick Mahomes, he'll play at Lambeau Field for the first time in his career. He has a win at 26 different stadiums, the most by any player before turning 30 in NFL history. Mahomes, and I'm paraphrasing here, said he's excited about the opportunities. Playing in a hostile environment will remind him a lot of home. We know that Andy Reid got his start from Mike Holmgren, ties to the Green Bay Packers organization. So fun for football nerds out there to see the iconic man at the position go to one of the more iconic venues in the entire sport. The Chiefs, meanwhile, they stormed back last week against the Raiders, outscored the Silver and Black 31-3 after spotting the Raiders a 14-0 lead. Green Bay, fresh off an upset at Ford Field against the Lions as touchdown plus underdogs, made even more impressive by the guys that didn't actually play for the Green Bay Packers in that spot. And when you look at Green Bay, assuming this number does hold at 6 as a consensus, they'll have a chance to pull off back-to-back upsets as underdogs of 6 points or more since 1988. Mother Nature, she could have her say, as she always does at Lambeau this time of year, but all signs point to it just being rather cold. The wind wintry mix should clear out before kickoff, but you're going to want to monitor that side of things as well. And Payne, when you look at a game like this, are you more interested to see Patrick Mahomes match up against the Green Bay defense or a resurgent Jordan Love against Steve Spagnuolo and a Chiefs defense that's been a strength of this Kansas City team all season long?
I think for our purposes, game open 7 at Chris, and you see the Packers go out and look like a completely different team on Thanksgiving. They're back home. They're getting a little more confident. Kansas City has not looked like the elite team. They got the big game on deck against Buffalo, and you can see why the case was made that hey, early Packers money. You can kind of get that vibe. As you start to dig in a little bit, I would think Patrick Mahomes is going to have some help this week. It looks like it'll be a balanced attack with where the Packers defense is against the run. I think you're going to see some Pacheco again having success on the ground. The way the Packers defend stylistically through the air probably makes Rashee Rice an interesting candidate again coming off his biggest game. I'd like to see more commitment to Rice in terms of getting him more snap share. Then you look at how the Packers are defending the tight end position, and they've struggled mightily. They're in the bottom 7 in terms of EPA allowed to the tight end position, so you would think that that's going to open some things up for Travis Kelce. I will say the injury report is pretty critical on this side of the ball. You have to keep a close eye on some of the Packers' injuries there, but they do appear to be trending better, and I think that's the reason partly for some of this bye. You have Jair Alexander, the green dot Devondre Campbell, Eric Stokes, Darnell Savage, Nixon, Rudy Ford, Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt. They were all able to record a practice to some extent to start the week, which is a really good sign. On the flip side, you mentioned Jordan Love. He is certainly trending upwards. If you look over the last 4 weeks, he's 7th in terms of qualifying quarterbacks in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation. You do start to look at some of those defenses over that stretch, and it's the Lions who just can't stop anybody right now. It's the Chargers. It's the Rams. What is interesting, though, is you start to read some of the happenings that went on post-game, and for whatever reason, the Lions decided to throw a wrinkle at the Green Bay Packers on a short week, thinking that would impact them because typically the Lions are playing more zone coverage. They don't have the horses to play man, but they elected to play gobs of man coverage, and they got absolutely shredded. Plan failed. Now all of a sudden you're stepping up in class against a Chiefs defense that we have ranked top 5 right now, and they actually play man coverage and know how to play man coverage. And I think that's going to be something important to monitor here. You also have some injuries. Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, Jaden Reed. Are those guys going to go? So, I mean, we might have a situation where Jordan Love isn't having his full complement of weapons. We also know that the Chiefs front has been getting pressure at a higher rate now that it's a little bit healthier and has all of its components. Jordan Love right now, QB 30 out of 38 in adjusted accuracy when pressured. So I kind of go back here, Todd, and if you remember Sunday Night Football last week, Ravens, Chargers, and it was very obvious the Chargers were the sharp side. They were taking money at 4.5, 4, even some 3.5. And one thing I kind of always take pride in is I'm not always just going to think that's the side. And Baltimore probably shouldn't have covered those numbers, but they did despite playing their C- game.
Hold on.
Going with this is I'll
let you finish your thought, and then I'll try and piggyback you.
The market, as we got down to 42 and the weather looks a little bit better, which you kind of astutely pointed out at the top of this game, right? We've seen some over money come in. We're obviously seeing some money on the Packers from 7 down to as low as 5.5 at the sharp shops, and I just kind of keep coming back to I don't know the path where the Packers have a ton of massive success on offense. Really, where you want to attack the Chiefs is on the ground, and it's not necessarily through the air. And so you have Jordan Love stepping up in class against this pass rush, this secondary of the Chiefs, and he doesn't likely have the complementary ground game because the Packers haven't been an efficient running team, especially with Aaron Jones out of the lineup. And even last week, it was really just one explosive, one burst from Josh Jacobs. You remove that long carry, and I believe the Chiefs gave up basically 3 yards a rush. So you're effectively going into this game having Jordan Love against the best competition he's faced during his upward tick, being able to do all of the things that the Packers prefer to do offensively. So it's interesting from that perspective.
No, and I think, look, I was going to jump in there, but you hit on some of the things that I wanted to talk about. Matchups-wise, it normally would suggest certain things. If Green Bay had all of their players, you could understand why you're seeing as much support for the dog in the over money. But if you're not 100% healthy, you don't have all hands on deck, it changes the dynamic of how the game will unfold. And I think regardless of where that last Sunday night's game between the Ravens and Chargers ended, you could have made a case that either side was right or either side was wrong, because if Zay Flowers doesn't bust it, the +4 comes home for the Chargers, but the Ravens left so many points on the board, and then counterpoint, the Chargers were -4 in turnovers or -3 in that department. So that game, a true coin flip, variance plays a role, and we could see something similar unfold on Sunday. But if Green Bay is able to get the win and move to 500, I'll tell you one thing, I'll feel a lot more optimistic about that over 7.5 Green Bay Packers reg season win total we bet that we thought was dead and buried about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
This was kind of the team that we expected, right? It was the defense is going to trend up a little bit. And offensively, they've been beaten and battered with injuries. Offensive line, we thought like their front five were very good, but they've just been decimated by injury. Key position players, right? Christian Watson in and out of the lineup. Aaron Jones missed more games than he's played, and so that's been unfortunate. We weren't expecting Jordan Love to be like a world beater, but when we played that, we effectively said, well, hey, based on performance last year for Aaron Rodgers, he was effectively like QB 20 in efficiency. We don't need Jordan Love to be top 5. We just need him to be somewhere in that same 20 range. And now you're asking to go over a lower win total with a slightly better defense and a slightly easier schedule. And that's kind of how we arrived at that. But now that you are getting Jordan Love, who is trending towards like playing at a top 10 rate over the last month, you can see how the wins are starting to accumulate. But I will say, like, even if you don't get a win here, you still got the Giants on deck. You still got Tampa. You still got Carolina. You got a Minnesota team that shockingly had some questions at quarterback. I thought they had found the Messiah after about a decade in the league, not doing much. But here we are. And then you have Chicago to end. So they're all winnable games down the stretch, even if you drop this one.
You got to be careful because you are a Nick Mullins apologist over there, and he may be the man to take the Vikings to the playoffs.
More than most, yes.
Better be careful in terms of what kind of fuel you add to the fire if we need Green Bay to beat Minnesota at a
That's with Kyle Shanahan, though, kind of pulling the strings. Let's see if Kevin O'Connell
Kevin
can.
O'Connell's done more with less so far this year. The fact is Vikings offense looks to have a pulse.
That is true.
Without Jordan Jefferson and a quarterback, he deserves a ton of credit. Without Justin
Can
Jefferson.
we make a caveat here? Because I know we talked about it a little bit on air, and everyone's like, oh, yeah, how the fuck do you only talk about 4 games this week? The 5th game we were going to talk about was Browns-Rams.
You gave him the winner.
Well, don't do that. Don't do that. This was a game that we talked about in the look-ahead line portion, and at the time it was 5. We said there's a 0% chance it stays 5, especially if Joe Flacco is the quarterback. And so we're kind of at like 3.25 right now as we talk about it. So it's like there wasn't really a need to deep dive that. The way the Browns play their defense, which is a ton of man coverage, is the coverage that is given Matthew Stafford currently, right? The older, less than 100% Matthew Stafford, a little bit more trouble. Whereas like when you get the soft zone coverage like he faced last week against Arizona is really going to prop that offense up a little bit. One thing that we did say is let's see if DTR clears the concussion protocol. It was a pretty severe hit. If he doesn't, I still think grabbing 5 was the right thing, because we've seen, something we pointed out ahead of that Steelers game was DTR has clearly the higher ceiling than a PJ Walker. It's very clear now he's got the higher floor as well. And so the Browns, got down 2 scores last week. DTR is helping them battle back, get to that score 14-12, and then PJ Walker comes in, the game's just freaking over. So whether it's DTR clearing concussion protocol or it's Flacco, you could see why the 5 was gobbled there, and we anticipated that. And so there wasn't really a need to deep dive this one because we kind of got out ahead of it and said that would be a mover on Monday. I also think with Flacco, it's interesting. Like the narrative there is like, oh, they just pulled some old guy off the couch who was eating potato chips. But if you've followed that story, he made it a point coming into the season that he was not retiring and that he was going to keep himself in pretty good shape. Now, this isn't like some world beater here. He's not very good. There's a reason the Ravens replaced him. There's a reason he's not in the league initially to start. But when we're talking about the options of Joe Flacco or P.J. Walker, Flacco's certainly a better candidate there.
Well, you need something at the position with a defense that good. Just don't turn the damn football over, and good things can potentially happen for a team like that as a facilitator. All right, my friend, point in the program, it's best bet time, broken down for the biggest games on the slate. May not have some of the most wiggle room in terms of the wagering market. So what have we identified for an opportunity to make a little bit of cash this weekend?
Boy, I mean, we could go to a certain game, but it's moved a little bit too much. I don't want to give people the second number here. This one is obviously quite ugly. It's one that you and I both like, and we expect this to certainly go much lower. You got to plug your nose a little bit, but it's rotation number 459, the Carolina Panthers.
Oh, don't watch this game.
No, I'm not. I mean, this is very much Indiana, Michigan State Part 2. I will not be watching this game. But the price to me is a little bit off here. You're now asking a Tampa team that's, I believe, lost 6 of 7 to not just win, but win by margin. Personally speaking, I'm going to grab 6 minus 15 on the bye. We'll grade it at plus 5.5. I think this very much has the opportunity to close 4.5. There's obviously been some shifts in Carolina, right? Fired Frank Reich. It's now being talked about from above that they're going to change their offense a little bit. And so when you get a change in offensive identity and you haven't really seen it yet, maybe that's a little bit of a wrinkle the Buccaneers haven't been prepared for. That's a defense that is downtrending massively and has been bitten by the injury bug. You think about how you want to attack the Carolina Panthers defense. It's usually the ground and pound game. The Buccaneers are one of the least efficient run offenses. Yes, Baker Mayfield is going to play because he is just a warrior. He's not 100% either. I think you'll see some health improvements for some of the guys on the Panthers defense as well. So let's just get out ahead of this. Again, I'm gonna personally play 6.15 on the bye. We'll grade it at plus 5.5. My guess is by Sunday this game probably 4. So.
And Chris Tabor, we trust. Go out there, have fun, Carolina, and give the team that knocked you from your chance to win the division last year, as improbable as that run was, a nice big shitburger to eat, to quote the great Lou Brown.
Quietly, behind the scenes, supposedly Jim Caldwell is going to be consulting with the offense. Now, he's not going to be the OC. He's not going to be the play caller. But Jim Caldwell is an offensive mind that we really respect that'll be doing some things behind the scenes. And I'm not telling you there's going to be some offensive outburst here. The total's 37. But it has
Steve Smith ain't walking through that receiver door anytime soon.
It has a chance to look a little bit more competent. All of the players have been talking about going to this RPO-based scheme, which the front office wants. The players seem to have liked. Frank Reich, for whatever reason, was dead set against it, claimed, hey, this isn't my offense. I don't know how that's possible because he was part of an RPO offense that won a Super Bowl. But nonetheless, Carolina Panthers plus 5.5 will grade it at. Again, if you have the ability to get to 6 at 15, go ahead and do that.
All right, let's see what we can do, Carolina. Let's hope we get a little bit of uptick as well in the defensive backfield. We'll see if J.C. Horn tries to give it a go. His 21-day activation window from IR happened on November 13th, so this would be the last chance to get him into the fold. Would only help trying to slow down Godwin and Evans with a hobbled Baker Mayfield out there. The Carolina Panthers plus the points. Anything else, my friend, that you'd like to share with our loyal listeners before we bid them a fond farewell and wish them nothing but the best of luck for a fun-filled weekend of championship games on Saturday and NFC playoff races on Sunday, or NFL playoff races, I should say.
J.C. Horn, baby. That would be a nice bonus if we were able to get him. But no, let's get out of Dodge. We broke down effectively 4.5 games. I thought pretty well. I think we'll get our listeners to a game that has some value, and we'll close substantially lower than what we gave it to them at. So let's start to
all right, ladies and
get a
gents.
little positivity going here.
You got it. That's what we will do. Every winning streak starts with one game, and it starts for us on Sunday with the Carolina Panthers plus the points against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Best of luck with all of your college pro football investments and wherever your other wagering pursuits take you. And with a Carolina ticket in hand come Sunday afternoon, we'll see you at the window.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Bet the Board. Make sure you follow Todd and Payne on X. Todd is at Todd Fuhrman. That's TODDFUHRMAN. And Payne is at Payne Insider. That's PAYNEINSIDER. Don't forget, our weekly newsletter comes with an additional best bet. Have that delivered to your inbox by clicking the link atop the podcast show notes. And most importantly, subscribe and download Bet the Board. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Wondery, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and all your other major platforms.